Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Christine Kennedy, and I work in the Office of Alumni Engagement. And I'd like to thank you for taking time on your lunch hour to join us for this very informative and much needed in this digital world webinar. Before I begin, I would like to recognize and acknowledge that I'm in my home in Ancaster, just up the road from Hamilton. And Lisa works at Mohawk, and Lisa's in the area too. And all of the land where this webinar is taking place is situated on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, and an agreement to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. At McMaster, we recognize land acknowledgements are an important part of our commitment to truth and reconciliation and to the Indigenous peoples in Canada. So today we are here to learn about digital well-being. What is it? What we can do to, create it in our lives. And this talk does conclude 2 weeks of programming as part of our At Home with Max series. So thank you for everyone. When I was looking at the registration list beforehand, lots of people attended last night who are attending today and prior events. So thank you so much. And we hope you are enjoying or have enjoyed the programming that we provided you. So I'm pleased to welcome McMaster grad and digital wellness educator, Lisa Pender. Lisa is the founder of Digitally Well, where she focuses on workplace training in digital wellness. So she is well-versed in sending out all the information that we're here to learn about. Lisa is a Mac grad. She's actually a double Mac grad. She has a degree in sociology and also she was part of the continuing ed for mindfulness. And maybe there's some people who are part of our Friday mindfulness. We also have courses on that through our continuing ed department. She teaches just down the road from me, up the road from McMaster at Mohawk College. And she's here virtually in 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions in our heart. Lisa, thank you. Take it away.
Thank you so much. So hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm beyond thrilled to be here, and the entire McMaster alumni team for bringing us together and allowing me to share my passion for digital wellness with you. And thank you all for coming. Time is the greatest gift that you can give people. So thank you so much for joining me today. Many people this year made New Year's resolutions to cut back on screen time, or at the very least to, maybe implement a digital detox into their life or routine, maybe spend a little bit more time face-to-face with others, or going for walks instead of spending time on social media scrolling. And although this really sounds like a relatively simple endeavor, we all know that behavior change can be really difficult, and knowing is not doing, which is why only 16% of people who set New Year's resolutions actually still have it today, which is February 1st. But regardless, whether you have made a resolution or not, today is a new day, and it's a great time. There's no time like the present to think about how technology is affecting how we live and work. And digital wellness, as you're going to find out today, is so much more than simply talking about screen time. It is really taking a look at our values, how we spend our time, how we work, how we live, and ensuring that all of those things are in line. So at the end of the webinar, I'm going to pose this question back to you again. What is one change that you can make today, either personally or professionally, that will bring you one step closer to achieving digital wellness? So as I go through the presentation, I want you to kind of keep this question in mind and really give some thought and maybe write down, hopefully jot down some ideas as we go. The great thing about digital wellness is that many of the concepts that we can learn can be implemented immediately, both personally and professionally. So we are going to just talk about, the fact that people are becoming increasingly concerned with what all this technology is doing to our health. And in fact, almost half of us are concerned about the impact of technology on our physical health and mental well-being. And so we're seeing a growing awareness here. Further to this, 32% of experts say that people's well-being is going to be more harmed than helped by technology in the next decade. So if you're thinking, yikes, I am too. So what is it that the experts are worried about? Well, probably a lot of the same things that you and I are, quite frankly, like how tech is affecting our cognitive abilities. This is a big one. This includes our capacity to critically think and analytically think, especially in the midst of a mis and disinformation epidemic. Experts are concerned about our memory, so our capacity to retain information, our attention span. Are you still listening right now? Or are you multitasking? Our ability to focus, be creative, and reflect. Just think for a minute, the last time you read something and actually reflected on it. We consume immeasurable amounts of information daily, but we just don't take the time to reflect anymore on what it is that we consume or the quality of things that we consume. So experts are also concerned about digital addiction. Simply put, do you control your technology, or does technology control you? But also looking at how big tech is structured, in terms of keeping us hooked with that never-ending supply of dopamine. Our ability to disconnect, in particular from work in the era of 24/7 connectivity. All that is part of the, stress of living in that 24/7 environment. And lastly, the effects on our mental health, such as increases in stress, anxiety, inactivity, and sleeplessness. This is due to information overload, doom scrolling. Our brains are just constantly pulled in many, many different directions, right? Due to this constant stream of information and interruptions and notifications, combined with that fear of missing out if we ignore them all. So, the good news is that when these same experts were asked, do you think there's any actions that can be taken to reduce or eradicate the potential harms of digital life to individual well-being? 92% said yes. And this is where digital wellness really plays a pivotal role. So before we get to defining what digital wellness is, I want to take a moment to find out how technology might be affecting your personal well-being. So we are going to do a poll right now. We're going to launch a poll on our screen. And we're going to find out all of the ways that you might be affected by technology. So if you think back into the last 6 months or so, maybe just go through the list and check off all that apply to you in terms of the ways that you've been affected by technology. So we have difficulty falling or staying asleep, increased screen time, passive scrolling behaviors, inactivity, having a more sedentary lifestyle, physical aches and pains associated with tech use. So tech neck, that's that rounded, achy tech neck that we feel from maybe doing too much time on our cell phone. Inability to disconnect in a meaningful way, having that pressure to be always on, feeling stressed, anxious, depressed, feeling isolated or disconnected, trouble concentrating or staying focused, as well as decreased productivity or finding it harder to stay organized and on track. If you can just check off all of those. And here we can see the results of this. Thank you so much for doing this for me. Yeah, we can see that many of us are affected by increased in screen time and are succumb to these passive scrolling behaviors. Hard to get off the phone at night. But as well as, we can see the effects on our sleep, on our health, on our lifestyle in terms of we know that the more time we spend on devices, the less time we are active. So we can see the correlation there. The inability to disconnect in a meaningful way. and as well as stress and anxiety and depression. So we are definitely seeing the effects. And then I see productivity at the bottom also getting a fairly high score there. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to close off that poll now. But what we see is that, the research on the effects of technology very much can be summarized into 6 key areas. And so you're going to see these, they were very similar to what is affecting you. So the first category is having difficulty falling or staying asleep. So let's keep in mind that, we're talking about correlation and not causation. So there are many reasons other than technology as to why people may not be able to sleep at night. Could be shift work, it could be medications. But we do know that there is a strong relationship between device use before bedtime and sleep disturbances. Physiological health, many of us report feeling the physical effects of screen time, as we just saw in the poll, as well as things like headaches and eye strain. But screen time, as I mentioned, is also associated with obesity rates because people are typically less active when they are spending more time on screens. Mental wellness, this refers obviously to the impact that technology has on our moods and our stress level, our anxiety and depression. Mental well-being is connected to so many different digital behaviors, such as the effects of consuming too much social media. It could be doom scrolling, it could be cyberbullying, but then it can also be caused from workplace factors, such as Zoom fatigue, or microaggressions that we might receive in emails or digital communication, or the angst and overwhelm that we feel in the workday because of too many digital distractions. When it comes to social relationships, I do feel that this is the true paradox of technology, that the devices that were made to connect us actually leave us feeling more socially distant and disconnected. We know that this is one of the big pain points of remote work, even for online education as well. There are many industries out there that are still trying to improve, what that remote situation looks like for their employees when it comes to connection and collaboration. But it's also changing how we communicate with others, right? And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later. When it comes to distraction, we know technology is stealing our attention away from things that we might want to be doing instead. We know our attention spans are shrinking and our ability to focus is eroding over time. We will talk about that in a little bit as well. And lastly, productivity. Of course, there are many ways that technology has streamlined many aspects of our workday to make tasks quicker and easier. However, people are increasingly engaging in multitask behaviors, which are not effective. Creativity is lacking in many areas, and that's because when our brain is distracted, it can't go into imagination mode. And we need that in order to be inspired. We all hate to be bored. I'm probably one of them as well. We like to use our phones to help avoid boredom at all costs, whether we're waiting in the grocery line or just sitting having a coffee. Our phone is always a welcome distraction, but boredom is necessary in order to free the mind and spark creativity. So the two are fundamentally incompatible. But you can see here that every single one of these has a direct or indirect impact on the way that we work or the way that we live our lives. Which is why I say, we cannot talk about wellness in the 21st century without talking about the digital part of that wellness, because technology is infiltrated into every aspect of our lives. So this finally leads me to the definition of digital wellness. Digital wellness is fairly new to the wellness space. It stems from the intersection of the fields of positive psychology, media studies, and sociology. In its most basic form, it really is easy to understand. Digital wellness really is simply about fostering a healthy and sustainable relationship with technology. It's formally defined as the optimal state of health and well-being that one can achieve while using technology. So digital wellness allows us to take advantage of all the benefits that technology has to offer, with regards to creativity and connection and collaboration, while avoiding any associated harms. So if you will, I want you to think, we're all familiar with wellness wheels, right? You can picture it kind of in your head, lots of different colors, and we have occupational, and we have financial, and we have all these different aspects of wellness. And I want you to think about, because wellness is holistic, and we have these different elements, I'd like you to consider how digital can fit into your wellness wheel, right? And we say that digital wellness is a mindful and intentional approach to technology use. If you are familiar with mindfulness practices, you know that we are mindful when we are aware of our thoughts and feelings in the moment. We are not dwelling on the past, and we are not worried about the future. We are in the present. And why does this matter to technology? Well, first, mindfulness helps promote self-awareness. And let's be honest, many of us are not very mindful when we use technology. In fact, we're mindless, right? We are simply responding passively to notifications or just using it out of habit or boredom, like I mentioned, right? We're simply responding unconsciously, very much unconsciously. And, we unlock our phone on an average of 150 times per day. So certainly not all those times are intentional or even useful. But when we use technology mindfully, we become empowered. And that is because we are using technology with intention. So self-awareness is a key aspect of that. The second thing it does is that it helps us to focus and increase our attention span. Gloria Mark has done some excellent work in this area, just has released a new book. She's a professor and researcher from the University of California at Irvine. She's been studying attention spans for over a decade, and the results are very clear. Our attention is decreasing. Back in 2004, she measured attention spans and found that people spent 2.5 minutes on any screen before switching. And in the workplace, if they were just doing activities in the workplace, not screen related, they were switching tasks every 3 minutes, okay? Over the years, this has shrunk, and most recently, her studies tell us that the average now is 47 seconds before we switch screens, right? And the median is 40 seconds. So the digital age is certainly accelerating this. Lastly, the preliminary studies on mindfulness-based stress reduction have found to be very, very effective. We know that these measures are very effective in managing tech-associated stressors, and they provide adaptive strategies for regulating negative emotions that are associated with tech use. So this is really key. And here are some of the benefits that I am speaking of when it comes to mindfulness. So this has been proven to decrease stress, lower blood pressure and heart rate, increased immune functioning, increases our self-awareness, like I mentioned, attention and focus, clarity in thinking and perception. It lowers anxiety and depressive symptoms, losing weight. You'll notice so many weight loss programs right now are centered on mindfulness. It improves eating behaviors because of that, because we're not doing unintentional eating, emotional regulation, and of course, academic performance. I say, give it a few more years and everybody will know. It will be mainstream that mindfulness is as good for the body as exercise and eating right. And just a fun fact here while I'm on this subject, Amy Schneider, who is one of the longest running Jeopardy contestants, you might have recognized her from last year. She attributes her success to mindfulness, in particular meditation, which she says gives her the ability to focus and really block out the noise and the pressures of the media. So we do know that people who do meditation are also very, very good at recalling information. So lots of ways to practice mindfulness. Here's a little excerpt from one of my workbooks that I use on different ways to practice mindfulness. It includes going for walks, it can be journaling, it can be meditation, it can be yoga, body scans. Practicing mindfulness can be simple, right? It can be as simple as leaving your phone at home and going out for a walk and kind of immersing yourself in the senses of what is going on around you, right? Just being present. But also some of them, are a skill. I have done restorative yoga before and I found it very difficult. The mind chatter just would not go away. But they call it a practice for a reason, and we need to train our brain to learn how to focus amidst all of the digital distractions that we have in our life. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the work that I do, because I'm really interested in diving deeper into the topic of how digital wellness affects workplace and sometimes academic performance. And workplace survey data tells us that designing the workplace for well-being and employee mental health are top priorities this year. So that probably doesn't surprise anybody. The harder thing is ensuring how to make sure that our organizations are structured in a way that maximizes digital well-being. And we can see from this chart that, well-being at work can be fostered and developed in many different areas. And these are the areas that really need to be prioritized in order to achieve a state of workplace digital well-being. So beginning in the top right-hand corner, we have communication, then we move through to interpersonal relationships, digital identity and citizenship. We have digital emotional intelligence, or sometimes known as virtual EQ or virtual emotional intelligence. We have productivity, and then of course, physical and mental health. Now, we don't have time today to go through every one of these, spokes in the wheel or any of the subtopics. I'm going to hit on a few of them. But we certainly know that communication digitally is very, very different in face-to-face due to the absence of body language in a virtual place. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to pick out one little category here, and I'm going to talk about communication in the workplace. And let's talk for a moment video conferencing. Video conferencing, because I think we have all experienced a Zoom meeting in our time, and you're frankly experiencing one right now. So let's ask ourselves, when is the last time you had a really, really good Zoom meeting? I mean, a really good one. There is so much confusion and ambiguity in a digital space, and virtual meetings are full of misinterpretations. Did he mean to cut me off? Did anybody notice that I logged in? Why is nobody asking me for my input? Don't they see that my hand is up? Is it okay to speak without putting on my video? Or, why did I put a comment in the chat and nobody's responding to it? Are they even going to notice if I log off? Why isn't anybody speaking? Or why are some people speaking too much? Or the worst yet, could this meeting have been an email? So communication really is anything but straightforward in a digital environment. And one of the things that we can do, we need to remember that these digital interactions play a role in not only how we work, but our wellness at work and the degree to which we feel psychologically safe in a digital environment. And so what teams are doing are increasingly creating charters. These are discussions that people have surrounding team communication, including after-hour boundaries and expectations for Zoom meeting etiquette, how to collaborate effectively from a distance, as well as how to deal with microaggressions or biases or these other subtle forms of incivility that we encounter in our digital spaces. And there's lots of ways to engage in digital well-being practices. I'm only able to kind of scratch the surface here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus mostly on the area of physical health, productivity, and interpersonal relationships. But as you can see, there are so many areas here that are really worthy of discussion, but we are going to get into some of the practical tips. And we are going to begin under the umbrella of physical and mental health. And we're going to tackle some of these areas that you see here regarding sleep and physical movement, for instance. So we are going to start, first of all, with sleep, because we all know that sleep can affect our workplace performance. Let's face it, it affects every aspect of our personal life, from how we, deal with our children and the moods that we are in, to all of the ways that this impacts our work in terms of the quality of work and whether we are making mistakes when we're at work. Technology obviously is a big contributor to lack of sleep, poor sleep quality, and sleep disturbances. The problem is that almost 85% of us will check our phone within 1 hour of going to bed. And the science tells us that the blue light from these screens will stimulate our brain, right? It actually stimulates those electrical impulses, and it makes it hard to fall or stay asleep because it affects our sleep cycle, our circadian rhythm. And so melatonin is suppressed. And what we have is, of course, we're staring up at our fan, and quite simply, this can be reduced by doing some very simple strategies at nighttime. Now, if you are having trouble sleeping, avoiding screens, ideally before bedtime, is a great way, great thing to start with. Some people say, hey, well, I can't do that. I can't give up my phone a whole hour before bedtime. One thing that you can do is you can utilize your phone's bedtime mode. And so that is a setting that you can put your phone on to turn your screen to grayscale. That helps avoid those late night blue light triggers. A great challenge I tell people to do, because most people will charge their phone overnight and they will charge it in their room. Try to do it outside your room. Find another place to put that charger, and rely on an old-fashioned alarm clock. Find other ways to relax at bedtime. Create a new bedtime routine, such as bathing or reading or anything that will get you off that phone a little bit closer to bedtime. Now, when it comes to physical movement and really our mental health, I argue that most people will treat their phones better than themselves. I know people that as soon as their phone battery hits 49%, they're running off to find an outlet. If only we treated ourselves like our phones and not letting our personal batteries drop so low before, we start recharging. We have to remember that periods of rest are required for great work. They should not be a reward. To buffer the physical effects of screen time that we talked about earlier, really, really important that we take micro breaks. And I say micro breaks because, even 5 minutes has been proven to effectively recharge our batteries. Going for walks, getting out into the fresh air, those are activities that are going to stimulate the brain through increased oxygen, releasing those feel-good endorphins. That will recharge your battery. Scrolling through your phone on a break may feel relaxing, but it's not going to recharge your batteries the same way that this will. So a quick timeout, whether you're meditating or you're stretching, any way to recenter outside of technology will effectively recharge. And if there's anybody here today that is a remote worker who works from home, I recommend, redistributing the time that it takes to commute with a workout or a walk around the block instead. What this does is it gives a really effective way to differentiate the start and end of our workday, both physically and mentally. And it helps define those work-life boundaries. So if you no longer have a commute, adding in that time is a really, really effective way, consciously and subconsciously, to put boundaries around your workday. Now, the 20-20-20 rule of eye health is really recommended by ophthalmologists. When we look at screens for any length of time, we actually blink less, so it leaves our eyes very dry and very tired. Screen time also causes eye strain and irritability. So to combat eye strain, ophthalmologists have developed this 20-20-20 rule of eye health, which is that after 20 minutes of screen time, look away from your computer for 20 seconds at something that's 20 feet away. And you can give that a try now if you want, right? So after 20 minutes of looking at the computer, look at something that's 20 feet away for 20 seconds and do lots of blinking while you're at it. So moving on to productivity, there are so many things that we can talk about, obviously under this particular umbrella, from managing distractions to, how to make the most of our time when we're at work, how to optimize our physical and digital environments. We're going to start with that one right now. And that is because, well, let me ask you right now, what does your work area or study space look like? In order to work effectively, we have to set the tone for productivity, and clutter is a huge form of distraction. A calmer, more simpler, serene space will help you focus and stay accomplished. But the thing is, clutter comes in two forms. It comes in physical and it comes in digital. So we know that exhaustion and the stress that comes from clutter, it affects our work performance. It decreases our job satisfaction. It increases our burnout. It's a huge form of distraction, as well as decreases our creativity. So lots of reasons to have a nice, clean space. Now, if your workspace, your digital workspace looks like this, you could be a digital hoarder. Digital hoarding is the accumulation of files to the point that it actually results in stress and it impacts functioning. And so what we might want to do is try a digital declutter, which, like the picture on the right, you're keeping only the important, widgets or apps on your desktop or on your home screen, and delete the ones that you don't use. Now, you might be familiar with Marie Kondo's Netflix show, Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. What you might not be familiar with is the fact that she wrote a book called Joy at Work, and subtitled Organizing Your Professional Life. And she highlights how workspaces that are cluttered and messy and chaotic are found to release cortisol in the body, which of course is the stress hormone. And studies show that clutter is a huge form of distraction, which is why some of us that do work from home are very distracted, right? When we walk around the house and we see laundry or dishes, it causes us this feeling of overwhelm, right? But on the contrary, if we feel like we have control over our environment, it influences how we behave and it improves our mood and productivity. So great reading in that little book, by the way. Next, we certainly know, and speaking of distraction, distraction is very costly for businesses. We know that it decreases productivity, increases error rates, puts us at greater risk of injury and accidents in the workplace. Obviously, this would be the case for, trades and manufacturing. It increases our cortisol levels, right? Again, the stress hormone. And it also decreases our creative output that we need, right, in order to achieve a state of deep work or flow. So what can we do about it? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to avoid multitasking. And, we love to glorify being busy. Our society loves to do it. But there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. And busy often comes from urgency, but urgency is typically demands made on our time by other people. So we know that the science tells us that doing one thing is infinitely more productive than multitasking. And scientifically, the term that more accurately describes multitasking is something called continuous partial attention or task switching. And that's exactly what happens when we stop what we're doing to answer an email when it comes in or a text message when it appears. And studies show that task switching increases our error rates. And that is because of something called attention residue. And that's due to our inability for our brain to fully transition from one task to another. So essentially what happens is when our brain is on task A, our attention is still left there when we are switched over or bothered or distracted by something new. And so according to Cal Newport, who is the author of a book called Deep Work, he says it takes people on average 23 minutes to fully return to deep work mode when multitasking happens. So it is incompatible with deep work or workflow. So obviously creating digital boundaries are really, really important. Creating an optimal work environment, in its most simplest form, what we can do is to silence phone notifications and block them. Some people do like app blockers. Forest, Freedom, Serena are great ones. But quite honestly, if you have to get deep work done, I'm talking projects, I'm talking writing, I'm talking about, that state of creativity that you sometimes need to get into to get your work done, depending on the type of work you do. Remove your phone altogether, out of sight, out of mind. But quite often this isn't going to be enough. You know it and I know it, and that is because we are still going to feel pressure to answer or check or respond, right? So you have to be able to take it one step further and have a system for setting boundaries and limits that provides that sweet spot between being productive yet being responsive to other people, right? Managers in particular don't necessarily have the ability, right, to close off an inbox. And let's face it, emails are a really big source of distraction in a workplace. And setting healthy communication boundaries is absolutely essential. Batching is a great way to be able to refrain, right, from that multitasking behavior to batching. So batching, just simply setting specific times in the day to read and respond to emails. This avoids having your inbox open and succumbing to those distractions every time. Team charters, again, as I mentioned early, are really, really important for setting healthy boundaries, and utilizing automatic emails are also a great way to let people know when you're busy or in deep work mode. I have an example here of one that was sent to me last week, and it's fantastic. And I'm sorry that it doesn't come through overly clear, but of all places, this came from, the OMHA, the Ontario Mental Health Association. So who knows health better than them for setting healthy boundaries? And you can see here, this person is explicitly stating, I have a greater than average workload right now, and it's going to take me longer to respond to your email. I mean, brilliant, right? We need to utilize these types of communication more often. All right, so moving on to interpersonal relationships. I'm getting to the last section here now. What we know about workplace relationships and interpersonal relationships in the workplace, we know half of employees, this was a study that was done from Mental Health Research Canada. This was done from last year. And this is an example of how digital wellness intersects with diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Which is, if I just go back a slide here, this is kind of this section right here. And just to give you an example, so this study was released last year from the Mental Health Research Canada. It found that half of employees that were interviewed felt that their organization was doing a good job at protecting them from psychological traumas, including things like discrimination or harm from clients, bullying, etc. But visible minorities were less likely to agree that they felt protected. Namely, Black Canadians especially do not feel that their employers are making enough efforts to prevent harm in the workplace. Further, studies in digital communications they tell us that minority groups are more likely to experience microaggressions and biases in Zoom meetings and in emails. They're more likely to be disrupted in a Zoom meeting when they're talking, and they're less likely to be remembered for what they said in those meetings. So we need to remember, we have to be more intentional and we have to be more representative in those digital spaces. If we're working in digital spaces or hybrid environments, we have to be intentional. We have to do better at fostering a culture of inclusivity. And lastly, this is arguably the most important slide that I have, and this one has to do with interpersonal relationships and the impact that technology has on our social relationships and the increase in loneliness that we actually see, not only in the workplace, but also in society. So we know that nearly 1/5 of remote workers are feeling, isolated in their work. But here's the thing. We can connect with others and we can bond with others. And we talk about corporate connection all the time, but I think what we need to be talking more of is corporate bonding. And connection, right? That's just bringing people together. And technology affords that all the time. It's doing it right now for us. Zoom gives us that platform, for instance. But bonding is the establishment of a relationship, right? That has shared feelings, interests, and trust with other people. And we can connect people with technology, obviously, but it's up for us to create ways to bond. And the big debate right now is, how corporations should utilize the time that employees are spending together in the workplace. And I'm all about collaboration and using that time to develop and bond. Because what is the point in going back to the office and forcing people to go back to the office if we're just going to put on our headphones and step into our cubicles, right? So it's really important in this time of workplace transition to figure out, right, the best ways to do that and how to nurture our time with others in ways that are productive and meaningful, right? And one more thing on this note here, there's an interesting trend that we see with younger workers today. We're seeing it as they exit post-secondary education, and we're seeing it in the workplace that, younger people are coming into the workplace with a lot of sort of unexpected phobias, if you will. They have a hard time with face-to-face communication, making eye contact. They would rather, when it comes to a difficult question, would rather text or email it than ask face-to-face. And so really what this tells me is that, they would rather have control over the situation, than not, because real-time talk obviously can be very anxiety provoking, right? Especially, for everybody, because there's vulnerability in it, right? But what we have to do is we have to push ourselves and have those tough conversations, because these things can't always happen through text, right? They need to be face-to-face, right? They need to be face-to-face. And the data is supporting this. And when we do look at, mandatory return to the office, and I talk about this because last week it was Twitter and then it was Starbucks who are saying, hey, everybody's got to come back. So it's getting lots of media attention. And, studies are beginning to show that younger employees are benefiting the most from return to work because they require the most mentoring, first of all, but then they also benefit from the practicing of face-to-face communication skills that they're not getting because they're replacing too much time on technology. So encouraging those face-to-face relationships are just so important, right? And maintaining that healthy balance, having that healthy balance between the digital world and our physical. We have to remember the data also tells us that, we don't perceive online interactions to be of the same quality as those done in person, right? So we have to kind of keep those things in mind. My last slide, I promised Christine today to talk a little bit about a digital detox. And so, of course, this is referring to a period of time that people take away from their devices and things like that. Lots of benefits of doing it. And Forbes and Pinterest and Glam, we're all predicting this year that digital detox is going to be the major trend. But here's the thing about phone-free self-care, as I call it. Detoxing doesn't mean that you have to trek off into the wilderness for weeks without Wi-Fi, unless of course you want to do that. But it can be as simple as leaving your phone at home when you're out for dinner with a friend. It can mean limiting app usage. It can mean scheduling tech-free time in your day. You might want to say, hey, you know what? 5 to 7 is family time. No technology over, dinner time. It can be muting notifications, or it can be setting those automated emails that I just showed you in terms of, hey, I'm going to respond on Monday because, I don't answer emails on the weekend. So as you know, I'm all about creating lasting behavior change, if you haven't guessed that already. So I'm into making digital wellness a part of everyday practices so people don't get to the point where they feel they actually need to have a digital detox. So hopefully you've grabbed a couple of things today where you can make a change and take you one step closer to digital wellness. I'm going to leave you with that food for thought. And I'm going to go back to Christine now to answer any questions that people might have.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, that was so fantastic. And, I'm blown away by the stats you gave. Like I've been, we went from 2.5 minutes down to 40 seconds with our I think it's Gloria and from California. Yeah, like that's the thing that blew me away the most was at the very beginning. You said, oh, we check our phones 100, unlock our phones 150 times a day.
Yes, we do.
And that's average, right? So clearly
that's average.
And the other thing too that I found quite interesting, how much our biases shape our behaviors. And of course they do, but some of the things that made me think, I've worked closely with the psychology department. Joe Kim, for anyone who was on the talk last night, Joe Kim hosted, and I've worked with Joe, who teaches the first year of psychology course.
Yeah.
And he always talks about cognitive biases, right? We think we can multitask, but we can't. Like research shows we can't. And the other thing where people think of so cognitive biases, people think, oh, well, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to scroll through my phone because I think that provides me with some downtime, some recharging. And again, you're saying the same thing that I hear so often. The research is there. You're just pointing out the research.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope everyone feels the same way, that there was just so much great information. We did have some questions that came through the pre-submitted, but I did want to ask a question because at the end of your talk, you talked about the hybrid model or the remote model, going back to work. And Natalie asked a question. Generally, what are your thoughts, recommendations on employees continuing to work from home post-pandemic? I'm thinking you would suggest that people do a hybrid, but let's hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, the research is pretty clear on that the hybrid model is the one that's actually favored by employees the most. And that's because it does give the best of both worlds. Where people are not necessarily interested in a hybrid is where they don't, if they don't see the value in coming back, right? That's the whole thing, is that employees want to see the value in it, right? If I have to now pay for parking and I have to pay for gas, and I live now, because a lot of people moved away from city centers, right, during the pandemic because they were allowed to work remotely. So, if I'm going to drive an hour and a half now to go back in, and now that's 3 hours out of my day that I'm not spending with my family or my children, where's the value added? So there's got to be value added in going back to the workplace. But for many reasons, in particular, the younger generation, we see that they benefit the most from hybrid work, but it's also great for, maintaining the relationships and building the trust and the teamwork that is so important in the workplace today.
So adding on to that, going back to the cognitive biases. So if someone, they're commuting and, I don't see the value in going in, could they maybe be misinformed about the value because they don't value or they don't understand the value of being just in with a team, right? Just seeing colleagues and being able to brainstorm. I would suppose it depends on, different types of work.
Yeah.
So, I wonder, how do you let people know there is value in actually just being around people once or twice a week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's an important role of managers, right? Is to communicate the purpose and the reasons behind, why we need to bring people together. And I think deep down, quite honestly, people know why, right? They do, right? They do, because we do know that people are not connected in the same way, in a virtual space. Right. And I think that although for some people it might be more of an inconvenience, if you will, right, to go back to that in-person setting. But, and I do believe managers play a big role here, because like I said, they have to state the value. And then they're also a little bit more responsible for, what transpires when they do come back. And we do know that, the bonding and the connections and things like that are nurtured in that face-to-face setting, right? So I do feel that managers and leaders really have a role there in explaining the value.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think deep down people know what the value is, right? They just may be sometimes inconvenienced from it.
Right. No one really wants to get dressed up anymore. when you can wear your comfy pants.
Well, and you know what? Then you communicate that. Right. And I've had that come up. Exactly. Right. I've had these discussions with workers before. Well, then you have, bring back your casual Fridays. If it's just your team, then you can be more casual, and maybe that can be part of your workplace norm charters, right? That can be part of, okay, well, we are going to come back in person on Fridays, but maybe it's only going to be for a half day and it is going to be casual. We're not going to be client facing today. We're going to just be team oriented, and people, you got to make it. All workplaces are very unique, right? So teams have to make it their own, and there's no rules, right? But you got to go through the process of figuring these things out, right? That's part of a healthy workplace.
Yes, good points. Back in the old days when we used to do events in person, we'd always joke that if you brought food, it would bring people out, especially students. If anytime you had an event on campus and you wanted students, you just laid out a spread and they were
exactly.
Right?
You're so right. Yeah.
Okay, so there are some questions in the queue.
Sure.
First, I do want to ask the questions that came in.
Okay.
So we had this one was a good one because a few people had asked sort of the same type of themed question about, screen fatigue. So is it better to engage in Zoom calls with video off as much as possible to mitigate screen fatigue? Do we always need to be on? Is that rude?
Yeah, so there's the best practices with any type of video conferencing is to have cameras on. However, I do believe that if you are feeling the physical effects of screen time, then yes, you need to mitigate that, because you're not going to be good to anybody if you have headaches, right? Or, vision problems and things like that. So I would like to, rethink the whole environment. Why are we having these back-to-back meetings? Like, why are we not scheduling breaks in between? Why are we getting to the point that we feel like we have to turn off our camera, right? Video cameras on are so important to meetings because it establishes connection and trust, right? So I often recommend to teams, even if you were to start out the first 5 or 10 minutes of every single Zoom meeting with cameras on, everybody says hi, everybody says hello, right? And then, you can step back. And again, this is where team communication charters come in, establish what your group norms are on that. Is it okay? Maybe it's, small teams. If it's less than 5, no, it's cameras on because we're a small group. But maybe over 20, it's going to be okay to shut them off at some point. So again, it's all about establishing good communication with your team.
Okay, that's good, because that question and your answer sort of segues into the next question. You talked about, why are we having back-to-back meetings all the time, so that people feel that they have to take their cameras off. So micro breaks. So this individual, Melissa, wants to know that how she can deal with her 2-hour meeting with colleagues in micro breaks. Like, how would you suggest micro breaks could be implemented into the meeting? Do you schedule it in? Your thoughts?
Absolutely. You have to schedule them in or nobody will take it, right? That's Parkinson's law of time in meetings. I'm sure you've seen that, right? I mean, if a meeting is 20 minutes, you'll fit it in 20. If you schedule 60, it'll take all 60. And so as a result of that, you have to fit in those times. I was talking with a group last week and they said, oh, this one meeting last week was so great because we had all these really informal discussions, and it really felt like we actually bonded on Zoom, for change. They were having like a really great discussion. But then one person said like, oh, well, it went too informal and they almost felt like it was a waste of their time. And so if you schedule them in and say, hey, we're going to spend the first 10 minutes of this meeting, having casual conversation. It's going to be when our videos are on. And then, we're going to move into the productivity part of the meeting. Like schedule them in and then say, hey, you know what, after 40 minutes here, we're going to have a 5-minute Zoom break and I'm going to throw on a 5-minute meditation, or I'm going to throw on a 5-minute stretch video. I do these with my students, we'll throw them on, and hey, if you want to walk away from your screen and go do something else, great. But in the meantime, this is going to be, this is our physical break time. There are clients that schedule walking meetings where nobody's presenting anything. It's just a matter of sharing information. And so they can put their earbuds in and go for a walk, and they don't have to, right? They don't have to be like on a screen. And so there's a lot of ways you can incorporate these things. But again, it's about being intentional, right? It has to be a priority for your team to take those breaks and to be intentional about them, whether it is, like I said, putting it right in the agenda. Nobody should have 2-hour meetings, by the way. Nobody's meeting should be 2 hours. Yeah, so, you got to be intentional and you got to schedule them right in, or else they'll just get glossed over.
So if someone, I would agree. And I think, most cognitive scientists would say like your attention cannot be focused for 2 hours at all. And I think this is why the question comes out about the micro break. So if a manager is, determined to have a 2-hour meeting, how many micro breaks would you suggest?
Depending on the structure of a meeting. So I'd kind of have to look at that and go, well, is this a one person presenting? Is this breakout rooms? Is this right? Because even breakout rooms allow a person to kind of step back and relax a little bit without the Brady Bunch overwhelm that we get from looking at a screen and trying to decipher, everybody's body language and that, what we can see and determine of, them on screen. But yeah, I would just be thinking, oh, I'm sorry. Speaking of digital distractions, I actually literally just had my screen just went away here. It wants to update my browser. So it just goes to show you, right? This can happen even to people like me, who I consider myself pretty good in the digital wellness spectrum, but how easily those distractions happen. Sorry. So back to your question about the Zoom meeting. I mean, we can certainly, I would say personally, I think every 20 to 30 minutes. Some people might find that a little bit too much, but my goodness, minimum 10 minutes for every hour.
Minimum. Wow. Okay.
Minimum.
There we go. All right. Well, hopefully that's helpful to Melissa. Melissa, well, everyone, you'll get a copy of this. You'll get a link in a couple days with a recording, and maybe you can anonymously send these people who report to a supervisor. You can anonymously send the audio clips in, and if you're a supervisor, then hopefully this maybe helps set some parameters and for what what you're looking for from your team. So we do have a couple questions, and then I think we'll close it up since we're a little after 2, and it's about young people, teenagers.
Okay.
So let me just kind of blend these questions together.
Sure.
Distractions with teens. So there's 2 questions. One is teens multitasking. They think they can multitask. Music in the background to study. So this, obviously this is a parent and concerned that they think it hinders ability to study.
Mhm.
How do you effectively communicate that?
Well, I mean, you're right in recognizing that there is a concern there. There's this great study that was done, and if you want the details of this, I can certainly get it to you because I can't think off the top of my head the exact name. But we do know that there was this study, and I refer to it often with my students, where they had students studying, and we know that there's a correlation, for instance, with how close the phone is in proximity and grades. So what they found is that students who had their phone on their desk while they studied did poorly compared to students where the further the phone was away. And what they did was they had one on the desk, one that was turned over, so kind of out of sight and out of mind, and then one that was in another room. And so what they found was the students who had removed it completely scored higher test scores. So we do know, right? Because it's what they call mere presence syndrome. It's the mere presence of the phone. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on, notification wise. The mere distraction, the mere fact that it's sitting there and right, that there could be something on the other side if we flipped it over, is enough to distract people from what they're doing. So there is definitely an issue there when it comes to studying. And so all you can do is educate, right? You can just educate, and as parents, it's hard, right? Because I know our kids don't want to hear it from us. Let them hear it from me. Tell them, it's all about education, right? Because and students don't know, and I'm working with them all the time, and they don't recognize that there's a connection there. Not always, but then many of them do. And they say, they're looking for ways to focus. They are looking for ways to manage these distractions because they do know that it interferes with their ability to retain information, right? To study and to get the work done that they really want to. They know that there's an issue there. So
if this particular student, who are the child of the person asking, was to listen to music, let's say from an old-fashioned stereo, right? So it's not on their phone, because the phone itself is the distraction,
sure,
maybe
yep.
not so much as the music.
Right.
So if there's music going on, like in the background from an actual radio, do you think that would be distracting? Probably depends on if there's lyrics or not too, right? Like, because you can the classical music, and that's actually quite calming, but I'm assuming this individual probably wants to listen to their pop music.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it's different for everybody. There's lots of people out there I know that they need that. They almost need that kind of soft, almost like not a white noise, but yeah, music in the background. It helps them. Some people don't. Some people want, like super quiet. It's a personal preference, right? It's how some people can be just as effective listening to music. Where we know that the problem is, it's in our ability to actually to stay focused, right? And to actually consume and reflect on what we are reading or doing, right? When it comes to studying, that's where there's a little bit of disconnect.
Right. Okay. And maybe we can follow up, because I will be sending out a link to everyone, or an email with the link to everyone, if you could pass along that study, so then we can
Yeah,
send,
yeah.
so all the parents can say, hey,
Here's the proof.
here's the proof that you shouldn't have your phone by you. So Aya has made a comment and asking a question about it, and maybe we will wrap up with this last question.
Sure.
So she's found that handwriting compared to typing helps slow down her thoughts and helped her concentrate better. She's curious if there's evidence on differences between handwriting versus typing to retain information.
There is. Yeah. Yeah, there is. Quite simply, that is a yes. And there are definitely studies to support that as well. And part of it goes back to the whole multitasking piece of it. But yeah, and it's less distracting for people around you as well, right? So for every student that's sitting in the front row, you got 5 or 10 rows of students behind you that are distracted by your screen, right? When you're sitting there with your laptop in a lecture. So, I mean, yeah, we do know that whether you're in a business meeting or in class, that hand notes are better for retaining information than typing them out. And if I recall correctly, I believe that one study showed that, you know, part of it is that you're immersing more of your senses in what you're doing. So yeah, definitely evidence to support that.
You know what, maybe we'll try to find the study for that too, because I seem to remember that too. And I think, oh gosh, this is going back. From what I can remember, I think it also, people who are on their laptops tend to try to think about things verbatim versus if you're writing something, it's more thoughtful or like free flowing versus like, oh, I have to type everything. And so that probably is going to make a difference too in how you retain the information, because you're not retaining if it's very passive, just typing versus handwriting, it's sort of, I would imagine, more thoughtful.
Yeah, because you have to take time to process and then
Right. Well, it is almost 10 after, and we've taken up lots of your time. You have given us so much information. With lots of notes here in the chat, thanking you. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Hopefully you can take some information like Melissa, no more 2-hour Zoom meetings. And you will get a recording of this in about a week or so. I'll try to find some of those resources that we'll add in for you, for your teens, and for anyone else who would like to learn more about digital well-being. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.